What up, what up, what up, what up? It's your boy P. Skip. Welcome to the best half hour of your entire Tuesday. You know what time it is. It's time to get into his court. My squad with me, T-Mac.
Hola.
Chili Will.
Gracias, amigo.
Let's do this. We're going to start a little different. The first thing I want to do is give a huge shout out to Milwaukee's own Giannis Antetokounmpo on his purchasing a stake in the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, as of now, they haven't said how much he owns, but he's owned enough that they're calling him an owner. So that must be enough for him to be just to be a legitimate purchase. He's got 240 million to buy something with. He already had a $100 million, $125 million contract before that, something like that. So, he could spend his money on some things. What do y'all think about it?
I think it's a great move. I mean, it was really exciting to hear. I mean, going back to the Bucks winning the championship a few weeks ago, Aaron Jones running back with the Packers saying, "Hey, we're up next." The Brewers still hanging on the first place in the Central Division. I mean, just rocking and rolling. I mean, it's really a great time for sports in the city of Milwaukee. And during the playoff run, a number of the Brewer players, different times in the season and during the playoffs would come out to the games. And so to see that camaraderie, that was great.
And
so
the Packers. And the Packers.
And the Packers as well. Exactly. So to see Giannis, buy a stake, as a minority owner in the Brewers, I think it does a number of things. Number one, it reciprocates that support. One of the great ways to show that you support something is to put your money behind it. Number two, the bigger thing is that in some of the comments that he made, he kept talking about, this is my city, and I'm part of the community here. And it really just underscores his commitment and appreciation to what Milwaukee has meant to him and his family. And given a number of the negative headlines that Milwaukee has received in the past, it's a continuation of championship, ownership, great news, progression, winning kinds of ways. And so above and beyond his, return on his investment, his plowing the bread into that professional franchise, and even the Brewers getting love because he's part of that mix too. It kind of, goes back and forth. It reciprocates back and forth one to another. I think it really amplifies the civic pride that Milwaukee is experiencing right now. And coming off the fact that we had the pandemic, we had won the Democratic National Convention, the first Midwest city other than Chicago since like 1926 to ever have it. And the pandemic wiped that out. And most of the things that were done in the election and the presidential piece was done in Delaware. And we didn't get a chance to get that windfall. To see now us being able to recoup some of that joy and excitement is really, really, terrific to see. And hopefully other players, can follow suit, those that have coin, and we can have this reciprocation and this intermingling of, sports and figures all up under the auspices of really wanting to take root and grow and bring excitement and cachet to Milwaukee. So I thought it was a wonderful move on multiple fronts and was glad to hear it.
Well, I agree with everything you said, but I would also like to say that this was a great PR move for the Milwaukee Brewers. I'll give the owner, Mr. Anastasia.
Atanasio.
I'll give him credit because this was ingenious, because Black people don't care about the Brewers, don't care about baseball. I mean, not all of them. I'm talking about in general. This is a minority majority city, and nobody that I know, anybody that you guys know, probably could name three of the Brewers. They don't care about the Brewers. The Brewers is not relevant in the Black community. And that's going on across the country with baseball. That's why baseball is losing a lot of its viewership. They're not getting those big TV contracts like some of the other sports are getting. So this was a great PR move to get Giannis to become an owner because of Giannis's high profile and what he's doing and what he's about to do. That brings a lot of positive attention to the Brewers, especially from the Black community. So that's great. The other thing was, I remember when everybody was, is Giannis going to leave? Is Giannis going to stay? And you guys know, I didn't think I was 100% sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, 99. Yeah, I didn't have any doubt that he was going to stay just from looking at the tea leaves. This is another example of Giannis really believed that Milwaukee is his town. This is the only town he's been in other than in Greece. His family's here, his children are born here, his dad passed here, his brothers graduated from high school here, he won a championship here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for him to put another flag down and ownership in the city of Milwaukee, to me, I think that's fantastic. And I think he's going to be an example for a lot of other athletes to do. I do want to add this. Giannis is not the only athlete MVP to have ownership in one of the professional franchises. As you guys well know, Aaron Rodgers is a minority owner in the Milwaukee Bucks. And there are other professional athletes who have ownership in professional sports teams. Serena Williams is a part owner of the Miami Dolphins. And what's the Kansas City's Mahomes?
Right, Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes is part owner of the Kansas City Royals. Mm-hmm. So you got LeBron James, part owner of the Boston Red Sox. So there are other professional players that are starting to see the value in buying stock and ownership into some of these franchises. And I think because of the change in demographics in the United States, it's best for these owners to finally see that, you know what, this can't stay a old boys club. It can't stay that. We got to let somebody else in and some other people in if we want to continue to survive and thrive in the future. So great PR move. I think it helps the Brewers way more than it helps Giannis. Giannis was going to be fine if he wouldn't have bought any into the Brewers.
Yeah, I think also in the history of sports, I don't remember these many athletes owning teams while they're still playing at the same time. You know, that seems to be an understanding of longevity with your money. I already got a plan for what I'm gonna do after I'm done. You know, and so for me, I just love the wisdom in what they're doing. Somebody must have sat down with them and said, hey, this is how you can have your money keep growing. This is how you make generational wealth. You go ahead and buy something that's already making money and will continue to make money. A sports franchise is one, and it's in your own city, so you get to watch and see what's going on at a very close clip versus, you know, like LeBron got to go from LA all the way to Boston to check on his team. This to me is, again, I love what I'm seeing. I love the trend, and I also love the fact that you're starting to see more minorities getting their hands in the ownership race or in the ownership club. That just, you know, it says a lot for Black Lives Matter to a certain extent. You know, that the needle is getting moved inch by inch.
Well, let me just say this. I got to add on this because you guys know how I feel about this kind of stuff. I mean, this stuff is really close to my heart. It's close to you guys' heart too. I know that. Right. But really, what it is Black athletes could always afford to do this. They weren't allowed to do it. They were kept out intentionally from being owners. And that's not just in sports. It's a lot of things that they could have been owners in, and they were intentionally kept out because of that old boys club thing. What's happening now is there is a need for different companies and different organizations and different businesses to have some type of tie to the Black community and the brown community. So that's why these opportunities, that's why I say this right here was more of a benefit for the Brewers baseball than it was for Giannis. And trust me, if they didn't need him, if they didn't want him, if they wasn't having these problems they having, attracting minorities, especially African Americans and Black people, to be interested in baseball, this would have never happened. This is something that they have to do if they want to continue to survive, because people are getting more conscious of where they spend their dollar. And that's the reason why Giannis got a chance to take advantage of this. And the owner of the Brewers, he could have let anybody do this. He just let Giannis do it because of who Giannis is. And that's, I mean, Dr. J could have owned part of Philadelphia, and, you know, Moses Malone could have, you know, all of that could have happened. But back then, they didn't need it because it was enough European Americans patronizing their sport, and the country demographic was so different, they didn't need it. Now the demographics is changing, and y'all know by 2045, there's going to be, you know, European Americans will be the minority in this country. So with that in mind, you got to start making your moves now.
Yeah, I think that there is some merit to that. I think that I will just expand upon it by saying I think there's a lot more money available too, because I think the players today, their contracts are, you know, worth more than the players, you know, back in the day. And while there is this increasing, I'll say, pressure or enlightened self-interest to ramp up the diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in the sports franchise ownership piece, I think it's a great investment. I think Herb Cole, when he owned the Bucks, bought them for like 18 million, sold them for a couple $100 million. And Jerry Jones similarly bought the Cowboys for less than, you know, 200 million. Now they're worth, you know, $3 or $4 billion. So it is an investment. And I think that we might need to be a little bit, I don't want to say careful, but mindful, even with the majority piece, because we look around the world, you have a number of individuals who are in the minority, but still run stuff. So it's not automatic that just because you are in the majority, as you know, these places, America becomes a majority minority, you know, place in its cities. If those minorities don't have the positions of power, it still won't necessarily mean a lot. We're looking at the continent of Africa, a number of the countries were majority Negro or Black, but they were colonized by other folks who held onto the power. And even still to this day, with many of those countries just now getting their independence as recently, you know, as the 80s and 90s. And the first one, I think, was Ghana, maybe in 1953 or so. That's a long reign of the minority people still in numbers, still having the lion's share of the power. So I think that one of the things that we are seeing, though, which is encouraging, is that people, Black folks, are getting hip to the fact that, hey, man, it's not enough for me to have just a good job or a high wage. I need to have an equity ownership stake in this, because that's where the decisions are made. That's where the real power is. And so for so long, we were moving just for the civil rights piece, wanting you to get your foot off my neck, not knowing that there was also a silver rights piece to this thing, and that's the economics. And to see folks waking up to that, I think is really, really powerful. Another great example of that, power economics, is LeBron James and Rich Paul and that whole group that they have. It's like, hold on, man, we're going to own some stuff. We're going to open up our own, you know, agency, sports agency. We're going to do it, Jay-Z, similar type thing. You know, so the fact that folks are waking up to the power and the importance of ownership and equity stakes is really, really cool. We just need to be able to marry that with the fact that even if the demographics change, it is who holds the power that's really going to make the difference, regardless of numbers in terms of majority or minority.
Yeah. Let me just say this. I was strictly speaking from a consumer standpoint, from a consumer, the people who got to buy goods and services. Goods and services got to be sold to somebody. And the people who got to buy goods and services, I mean, just think about it. In the United States, it used to be whites only. They could get away with whites only back in the 50s and the 60s, and they can't get away with whites only no more. That's not going to work. So when the demographic, and I'm talking about from a consumer standpoint, you know, it ain't enough white people to sell pancakes and hamburgers for you to be the Burger King. You're going to have to sell it to some minorities if you're going to make the kind of money you need to make. So from a consumer standpoint, minorities are starting to wake up and say, hey, if all the Black people tomorrow say we're not going to buy a Dial soap or Pepsi soda, they pretty much go out of business. And they starting to wake up to their power as consumers and people who purchase goods and services.
Yeah, diversity is definitely important. So let me switch gears. James chapter 4, verse 17 in the Amplified says this. So any person who knows what is right to do but does not do it, to him it is sin. Colossians 4:1 in the Amplified says, Masters, on your part, deal with your slaves justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Now, I said that we could say owners or employers or bosses. Deal with your people right because God's watching. I said that to say there's been so many trades going on in the NBA right now. I mean, you see, like, for instance, I was looking at just some of the stuff that's going on. For instance, the Lakers. The LA Clippers. The LA Clippers acquired Eric Bledsoe from Memphis for Patrick Beverly, Rajon Rondo, Daniel Arturo. Do you think this made the Clippers better or worse? Now, last year we were talking about the Clippers about to do great because playoff Rondo is about to show up and kill the joint. Playoff Rondo didn't do well in the playoffs last year. So how do you think the Clippers did? Do you think they got better by adding Bledsoe and getting rid of Rondo, Beverly, and Daniel? Or do you think they got worse?
I mean, I'll dive in. I think it's, quite frankly, non-consequential. I don't think that, those players really are the infrastructure of the Clippers. What the Clippers need is a healthy Kawhi Leonard who can be a bit more vocal, and a Paul George, although he improved, playoff P or whatever last year, he missed some critical, shots too. And when it came time to step up late in the playoffs, he didn't deliver. So I think those two players are going to be the biggest question mark for them. And if, Kawhi Leonard is going to miss the entire season, I don't know that they're going to be formidable enough to put up a challenge in the stacked West to get out of the second round. Of course, you got the other LA team, the Lakers. You also got a Phoenix team that's chomping at the bit. You got Will's favorite team, the Utah Jazz, who he's saying to keep an eye out on. Then you got a Jamal Murray coming back to Denver. So I don't know that the Clippers, absent having a fully healthy Paul George who can step up and be clutchy, a la how the Bucks grew this year, and a healthy Kawhi Leonard, that little trade with Bledsoe, I think is inconsequential, personally.
I like that word, inconsequential. Can I
go right ahead.
Can I play?
Go right ahead, kind sir.
I think that's the best way to describe it. It's inconsequential because honestly, there's nobody who's more scared of the Clippers now since they got Bledsoe. Mm-hmm. Ain't anybody sitting about, they got Bledsoe. Not like they saying Westbrook with the Lakers. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They ain't nobody sitting back here saying, oh boy, we in trouble now. No, it's strictly inconsequential. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes, sir.
Don't matter.
Yeah. My lips too big. I can't say those. But anyway, but I would say this though. Bledsoe, we all know, we've seen him. He played for us. He ran our show for years. Bledsoe is a serious ball player. He's very good. His problem was the playoffs, and his problem was free throws. He had some really itty bitty problems that we really, really, really needed him not to have in order to be successful. And because he had those problems, we couldn't win. The Clippers can still win if he don't make free throws. They can still win if he don't hit those shots, if they got a healthy Kawhi and a healthy Paul George. So him being on the team, I think it saved them some money. I think it got them younger. I think Patrick Beverly pretty much had, he had
wore out his welcome.
Yeah, he had wore out his welcome. He had ran his course. So from that standpoint, yeah, they solid. But like you said, I'm not, and I haven't heard anybody say that we believe that the Clippers, even Las Vegas, that we believe that the Clippers are favored to win the NBA championship this year. I think they like 4th or 5th.
And quite frankly, given all the, hubbub that was made when they brought in, Kawhi and Paul George, as we recall, the Lakers were trying to make a move for Kawhi, and he kind of spurned them. Then to add insult to injury, had this little New Balance commercial with the little subliminal message with him with a chain on it, had like a crown, like I'm the king, not LeBron James being King James. So all those kind of jabs, and they underachieved. They cost Glenn Rivers his job a couple of years ago, losing in the bubble. And this year, when it was time for them to come back, and they were looking like they were pretty strong coming down the stretch, they had an unfortunate injury to Kawhi Leonard, his second major injury in his, career, second or third. I mean, so now it's to the point of, okay, Clippers, not only are we not scared of y'all anymore, but you guys might be permanently labeled as underachievers because y'all can't do nothing. It'll get to the point where people say, okay, they ain't gonna do nothing. Why? Because the precedent has been y'all don't do nothing. And so using the Bucks as another example, great regular season team, come in highly, seeded, et cetera, et cetera. But if you fizzle in the playoffs, you will get the reputation of being a hook and a scrub until you demonstrate, no, we ain't them same hooks and scrubs no more. We've learned our lesson. We grew from that pain, and we ain't going to be the ones being put out prematurely anymore. I don't know that the Clippers have that in them, and they will have to demonstrate that to me, or they will quickly become another member of the trash heap of also-rans, despite having a couple of quote-unquote star players.
Well, I think the Clippers overplayed their hand. Getting rid of Montrezl Harrell and getting rid of
Lou Williams.
Lou Williams.
Yeah,
that was huge for them because them two dudes was major contributors to the success of the Los Angeles Clippers, and they got rid of them like they was like dirty laundry. Exactly. And now you see, people feared Lou Williams as much as they feared anybody in the league.
Right.
And Montrezl Harrell came in and played with more energy. I mean, you think about energy guys in the NBA. He was the poster child for energy guys in the NBA. Yeah. And I think they played their hand by letting them two guys go. And I don't think they're gonna ever recover from that.
And to underscore that point, Will, they were successive sixth men of the year, and they had a chance to pick or choose. They had an ultimatum. I think that after the bubble year, they were dealing with Montrezl Harrell, and apparently, from what I hear from sources, he was the one that got on Paul George. There were two major complaints. One was, why are you acting like Paul George is an elite player? He doesn't have any hardware, doesn't have any championships. Don't treat him like a prima donna. He ain't earned that. And number two, in these playoffs, when he's been playing like a hook, Montrezl Harrell would get into his face, and they had some conflict. And so after that, owner, Ballmer, and whoever else make the decisions with the organization, they had a chance either to, okay, Paul George, we gambled on you. That ain't working out. We're going to keep this energy guy who gives us 100% effort all the time. He just won the Sixth Man of the Year award. We could do that, or we can say, hey, he's a little bit too aggressive. We're going to go ahead and discard him and put all our chips with you. And we see how that turned out. And I think this might not be the last time that they, come up snake eyes dealing with Paul George, because he hasn't in his career been able to win the big one. And we all know, as a barometer for players, fair or unfair, that piece of, hey, has he won the championship? Has he been a contributor to a championship team? And Paul George is 0 for 2 in that category. So they might have some regrets about, rolling the dice the way they did, because they appear to have crapped out.
It's over.
The NBA is all about, singing Janet Jackson's old song, "What Have You Done For Me Lately?" Mm-hmm. And really, Paul is still getting paid for what he did in Indiana. He hasn't done anything really since Indiana, and so we're looking at Paul George and we're going, eventually we're going to get Pacer Paul. But I don't think that's ever going to happen again. But even looking at Patrick Beverly, he didn't even stay with Memphis. They shipped him off to Minnesota. So he didn't even go from the Clippers to Memphis. He went from Clippers to Minnesota.
The worst team in the league.
Right.
And all them antics and tactics that he do, that only work on winning teams. They don't work on the worst teams in the league.
And really, I think what he sees is he's on his way out the league. Unless something changes about it, he's on his way out the league. And so just keeping it moving, let's look at the Brooklyn Nets.
Let me make one more prediction before we move on from the Patrick Beverly thing.
Okay.
Don't be surprised if he cut his hair.
Just change his whole look.
Don't be surprised if he cut his hair.
He might have to get a different mindset. I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, listen. Well, let's look at what Brooklyn Nets have done. They got rid of Spencer Dinwiddie. They traded him to Washington, and they got Chandler Hutchinson, which I don't know who that is, from San Antonio, and a second-round pick in the 2020. Here we go again. Brooklyn, for the most part, realized we don't have any money to keep anybody else on our team. All of our money has been spent on these three cats. And anybody who has potential that we may have to pay in the next year or two, we better see what we can get for them now, because we aren't gonna get anything for them later, because we ain't got money to pay them. And I think I'm not seeing how the Brooklyn Nets can get any better, because their bench is just devastated. Who do they have really? So you're gonna have
Blake Griffin
being your sixth man of the year.
Yeah.
That's tough, which means them big three gonna have to play 38 to 40 minutes a game for them to win. And I really don't think their bodies can hold up to that for a full year and playoffs. I don't think so. I really don't. So I really think going back to LA, I think they got no better. But I think Brooklyn, they needed Dinwiddie, but I don't think they had the money. They needed a spark off the bench, but they just don't have the money to keep him. And I think that's going to come back to bite them later on. I really do, because go ahead.
I agree with you 100%. I'm not worried about Brooklyn. I'm really not. And I wasn't worried about Brooklyn this year. I was concerned with Philly.
Yeah.
Because don't nobody got nothing for Embiid. Nobody ain't got nothing for Giannis. Giannis and Embiid are two of the the Joker are some of the toughest covers in the league, man. It's hard to hold them cats, man, as bigs. So Durant, we know what you're gonna do. We know what the bearded one gonna do. We know what Kyrie gonna do. We know what they gonna do. Who don't? We know what they gonna do. They can do that every night and still lose if it's not like you said, Pastor. If them bench players and them others don't contribute in a consistent major way,
right?
And they don't have it. They don't have it. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that.
I'm a little concerned about Brooklyn. I hope that they hold true to form and flake out late in the season. I don't wish injuries on anybody, but they, can be some head cases. But I think they had some marginal improvement. I mean, Patty Mills is a good player. I think the Joe Harris guy kind of underachieved. And in some of his post-season commentary, he really, kind of took some blame for letting the team down. So I'm thinking that those guys are going to come in. They've probably been told, hey, you guys know you're going to be just support. But if y'all give us the support that we need from y'all, we can go ahead and win the championship. I think that losing to the Bucks the way they did, I think with Harden and Kyrie going down with injuries, they feel in their heart.
So listen, great show, fellas. We'll be back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Every Tuesday night from 7 to 7:30. Joy 1340 AM, 98.7 FM. Also, check us out on YouTube and Facebook, as well as, listen, fellas, we got an amazing conference coming. Meet us at the Miller High Life Theater, September 17th and 18th. We're going to have an amazing conference for you fellas. We'll also be there doing the show live. Come check us out. We'd love to see you. Until next week, have an amazing week. Peace.